Gulliver, we are now entering a third day of these elections in Russia. How exactly are they being viewed in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, the elections are being held not only in Russia, but also in the parts of Ukraine that Russia occupies, four regions of mainland Ukraine and Crimea, and that the Ukrainian government absolutely views as illegal and unacceptable. 55 other countries plus the European Union, along with Ukraine, have signed a declaration to that effect. And the Ukrainian government appealed to the international community not to send observers to those territories that would legitimize in any way the electoral process, and appealed actually to the media not even to refer them to these things as elections, but to put it in inverted commas, or so-called elections. One Ukrainian media NGO, the most prominent one probably, the Institute for Mass Information, has actually said that the media shouldn't refer to the election in Russia as an election at all without qualifying it in some way, like a pseudo-election or so-called election. It's clearly perceived as just a show, basically, that will guarantee to have Vladimir Putin return to power. Ukraine is still a flawed but functioning democracy. Russia clearly is not, and Ukrainians are very well aware of this. Despite that, Ukrainians are talking about this election quite a lot, it seems to me. A lot of Ukrainians have relations still in Russia that they have fallen out with to a very large degree. Here in this village where I am, yesterday, one local woman was talking about her sister, who lives in Russia, was voting for the communist candidate, and she rolled her eyes as she was saying this, as though her sister somehow still believed that that was some kind of a vote against Putin, although the three candidates who are standing against Putin haven't really criticized the Russian president, and I think all of them sanctioned by the West one way or another due to their attachment to this war involvement in Russia's illegal actions in Ukraine. But it is being watched quite closely, not because Ukrainians are interested to see what the result will be. They know what the result will be. But apart from the sort of anecdotal joking and mocking the Russians for their farce of an election, and sadness about how so many Russians don't seem to understand that they're living in a totally totalitarian state and victims of propaganda, the one thing that Ukrainians fear might come after this election is that after the election, Vladimir Putin might feel more encouraged to go ahead with a big wave of mobilization that might be unpopular, and he might have been holding back on that military mobilization until after these so-called polls.
And in the run-up to those polls, Gulliver, Ukraine has been intensifying its strikes on Russian territory. Is this simply aimed at disrupting the ballot?
Well, certainly partly it is. That's what these pro-Ukrainian Russian armed groups have been saying. They've been trying to disrupt the vote in the regions of Russia that border Ukraine, Belgorod, Kursk in particular. And I think they've been successful to some degree in that. So I think there's been a lot of disruption of the voting process in Belgorod, which was described by the French reporter Anne Nivat yesterday, who was there, as something like a ghost town. Everything's closed, and I've seen footage of people queuing up at petrol stations to get out of the area. So they clearly have caused quite a lot of disruption by their incursions into Belgorod and other border regions. The more longer-range strikes that we've been seeing coming from Ukraine, particularly on oil refineries, aren't aimed so much as disrupting the election as at damaging Russia's economy by hitting the oil industry, which is, of course, one of its mainstays.
For that analysis, thank you so much.